the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any proposed additions or deletions to the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion does carry. Next are consent items. Ms. Thompson.
On tonight's consent agenda for council's approval, we have the city council minutes of September 3rd, Willmar Municipal Utilities Board minutes of September 9th, Planning Commission minutes of September 4th, application to conduct excluded bingo by Church of St. Mary, a resolution declaring surplus equipment and authorizing sale at public auction, accounts payable report August 29th through September 11th, council's acceptance, the Park and Recreation Board minutes of August 28th, monthly building report for August, and for council's information, the Invest in Willmar Board minutes of July 31st, and the City Hall Task Force minutes of August 20th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the consent items as presented. Discussion.
Do we have to pull item E? It's a resolution.
No, we have to do a roll call on it.
Okay.
So I was going to mention that.
All right.
That takes a roll call. That's what we're doing, a roll call tonight. So, anything else? Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus,
Aye.
Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Next, we'll have a couple of mayoral proclamations. We've got a very active arts community in Willmar, and Councilmember Fagerly, on my behalf, presented this to the Celebrate Arts, Celebrate Coffee committee as I was out of town the day that they were doing their initial conversation. So I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, unless you would like to do it, Councilmember Fagerly.
Well, that's fine.
Okay, proclamation, whereas music, theater, dance, poetry, painting, and other forms of fine arts are important to residents of Willmar, Candioi County, and our region, and whereas regional people have fond memories of Willmar's coffee heritage, and whereas special events benefit our community and the people residing here, and whereas Willmar Area Arts Council volunteers have worked diligently to provide this fine art event in our downtown, now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Marv Calvin, Mayor of the City of Willmar, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2019 as Celebrate Art, Celebrate Coffee Days in Willmar, and encourage all citizens to visit our downtown and attend the festival's activities. In witness, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Willmar to be affixed, Marv Calvin, Mayor for the City of Willmar. It should be noted that this event will be held at Kennedy School and not downtown as it states here. I know that they were in the process of getting that set, but I heard on the radio today that it was going to be held at Kennedy School, so that's where it will be. So our arts, again, are very important to us, and I am pleased to read this proclamation. The second proclamation we have is for Career Force, an organization within the city of Willmar, and very important to our community as well. Having people have good jobs and have opportunities to expand their places of employment and or opportunities for employment are something that we need to promote. And so I'm very pleased to read this proclamation as well. Proclamation by the City of Willmar. Whereas Career Force is Minnesota's career development and talent matching source, unifying all elements of Minnesota's workforce system to increase efficiency, improve outcomes for career seekers, employers, communities, and Minnesota. And whereas Career Force is a sign of our recommitment for Minnesota employers and career seekers to put equity at the center of everything to meet our customers where they are, and whereas unprecedented changes in our state demographics between 2015 and 2035 mean employers and Minnesota's workforce system must work together to bring sustainable employment to the workforce. And whereas by 2035, 1 in 4 Minnesotans will be from a community of color or indigenous population. I knew I was going to struggle with that one. Whereas Career Force provides tailored resources to help meet the needs of all Minnesota career seekers and employers by helping them find the right workers from entry level to highly skilled. And whereas Career Force serves our career seekers through customized, no-fee career planning, resume enhancement, and interview preparation, plus education and training to search thousands of Minnesota job openings online. And whereas Career Force is Minnesota's unified workforce system, helping drive prosperity for all Minnesotans. Now, therefore, I, Marv Kelvin, Mayor of the City of Willmar, do hereby proclaim that the week of September 16th shall be observed as Career Force Week in the City of Willmar on the 16th day of September. And I have signed such and affixed the city seal. So if you'd like to come forward, I'll present that to you. Thank you very much. We had no one here to speak on the open forum, so we'll go for a hearing authorizing the sale of real property to Burlington Northern Santa Fe. I'll go ahead and open that public hearing and turn to our city attorney, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This agenda item is consideration of an ordinance authorizing the sale of real property to Burlington Northern Railroad. This is consistent with the Master Y agreement the council approved back in January, as well as the specific purchase agreement the city entered into with BNSF at the same time. Generally, this is the city contributing land it owns that BNSF needs to establish its Y corridor that will bypass downtown Willmar. It's a 200-foot wide strip of land, primarily located on land in the west of the city, where the city's former airport is located. It's just west of the industrial park, just east of County Road 55 and parallel with County Road 55. In addition, there's about a 200 by 200 foot segment of the city's sewer corridor farther to the south, contiguous, otherwise in line with the rail corridor that the city is also conveying. The recommendation is, as this is consistent with the council's action to date, that the city council approve this ordinance, assign it a number, and publish it.
Okay, this is a public hearing. The public hearing is open. You have heard opening comments. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing and hearing no comments from the public, I'll bring it to the council. Council, what are your wishes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and approved to approve the motion as presented by the city attorney. Discussion. Roll call.
Did you want to close the hearing?
I'm sorry, thank you. I'll close the hearing, bring it to the council table. Council, what are your wishes? We have a motion and a second. No discussion, and so roll call.
Okay. Councilmember Meske?
Aye.
Schwantes?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Alvarado?
Aye.
Osmus?
Aye.
Plowman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Fagerly?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Next, we have the 2020 EDC budget presentation by Aaron Backman, the Executive Director for the EDC. Welcome, Mr. Backman.
Yes, good evening, Aaron Backman, ADC. The EDC respectfully requests the City of Willmar's approval of the 2020 operational budget for the organization. As you know, in 2003, the City of Willmar and Kandiyohi County established this organization to encourage development within both the county and the city. Approximately 88% of the EDC's revenues are from a county tax levy. The remaining income comes from grants, loan repayments, interest, reimbursements, and the like. The proposed EDC budget for 2020 totals $606,588, including a county tax levy of $434,000. This compares with a current year budget of $708,613, including a county tax levy of $528,600. So this represents a 1% increase in the county tax levy for the upcoming year, which is the smallest in 5 years. And the total budget is going down by a little over $100,000, in part because we were able to get a fairly sizable USDA grant for Simply Shrimp for doing a feasibility study and so forth, and that federal pass-through money has been expended as of this fiscal year. I would like to highlight a couple of quick things here in the budget, if you've had a chance to look at it. Most of the sections are roughly about the same. A couple of things to note, Build or Tiger II grant, we're hopeful that there will be expenditures coming out of that in the near future. I have already mentioned the $107,000 USD Simply Shrimp grant. Probably the biggest single change in our committee's budgets is related to agriculture and renewable energy development. There's $25,000 that is allocated for industrial hemp value-added study. We're hopeful that we'll be able to get a USDA grant for that. Connie Schmall in my office is working with our ag committee in terms of trying to pursue that. Obviously, the long-term goal would be to have a production facility here. And those are some of the highlights that are in the budget. I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your budget presentation, Mr. Backman. Council, any questions for the EDC Executive Director? Seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the presentation as presented.
Make a motion to approve the Economic Development Commission budget as presented.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Thank you, Aaron, for your good work.
Thank you.
Next, we have a Public Works Safety Committee report for September 4th. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Works Safety Committee met about a week and a half ago, September 4th, in conference room number 1 at the city offices. Members present, City Council member myself, Mr. Plowman, Council member Osmus, Nelson, and Davis. Others present were our Public Works Director, Mr. Christensen, our Police Chief, Mr. Felt, and our Administrative Assistant, Kelsey Del Bosque. We called the meeting to order, and we had a brief update from Public Safety. Fire was not available that evening, so we received basic statistics year-to-date and monthly statistics from our Police Chief, which should be included in the packet. Does anybody have questions on those that they would like answered by our Chief? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. We had a couple action items this night. The first one was acceptance of project number 1610 and 1810. Staff brought for approval the acceptance of project number 1610, 1810, and authorization of final payment in the amount of $81,037.46 to Lametti and Sons, Inc. Project number 1610, 1810 was the replacement of the Armory, Gorton, and Fairgrounds lift stations. A motion was made and seconded authorizing this payment, and I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the, accept project number 1610 through 1810 for the Armory, Gorton, and Fairgrounds lift stations. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Alvarado?
Aye.
Osmus?
Aye.
Bauman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Fagerly?
Aye.
Meske?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilman Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next item was discussing the 2019 street improvement projects and a couple of resulting change orders. Staff brought forth for approval the change orders on project number 1901-A and 1901-B. Change order number 1 in the amount of $13,452.08 for project 1901A, reconstruct a 5th Street Southwest, resulted from replacing of a drain tile and adding additional fill in order to stabilize the soils. Change order number 1 in the amount of $8,008 for project number 1901-B, reconstruction of 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th Street Southeast, resulted from lowering a water main and adding an additional sanitary drop. We're going to do 2 of these. So regarding 1901-A, a motion was made and seconded for that change order in the amount of $13,452.08, and I will make that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a change order for project number 1901A in the amount of $13,452 8. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second motion that was passed was for the change order number 1 in the amount of $8,008 for project 1901-B, and I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve change order number 1 in the amount of $8,008 for 1901-B. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item on our agenda discusses the Dorothy Olson Aquatic Center and the resurfacing project, and we've been working on this one for some time, so we were happy to get it back to the table and to discuss it and hopefully move forward. Staff brought for approval the bid award for the Dorothy Olson Aquatic Center pool resurfacing project. 2 bids were received, with the low bid from Global Specialty Contractors, Inc. in the amount of $243,447 for the base bid and alternates of acid-right pH control system and a poolside climbing wall. Motion was made and seconded regarding the authorization of this project in the amount of $243,447 awarded to Global Specialty Contractors, Inc., and I'll enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a bid along with 2 alternates, alternate B and C, for the Dorothy Olson pool resurfacing project to Global Specialty Contractors in the amount of $243,447. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Maskey.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Alvarado.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, final topic that we discussed that night was regarding the Robbins Island beach closure policy. And this was an interesting conversation that we had, and we'd been looking forward to having this conversation as well. And I think we had the appropriate individuals at the table, so it was quite nice. Staff brought for information the discussion of the Robbins Island beach closure policy. The beach is tested every Monday from Memorial Day to Labor Day for fecal count. If the count is over 200, the beach is closed, and staff retest the water daily until the levels are below the defined threshold. And I believe, if I'm correct, that is an EPA standardized threshold. Is that correct? So that is an EPA-defined number. It is the recommendation, and after lengthy discussion, it's the recommendation from the Park and Rec Department to continue testing the water in order to protect the public. And I would just add, beyond what's listed here in our minutes, we did have lengthy discussion regarding the policy itself, the numbers that are used, why those numbers are used, the fact that Willmar has access to the technologically necessary equipment to do this test, so it behooves us to be able to run these tests, whereas other communities don't have that option. And I guess it was, and somebody else from the meeting can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was our consensus that we felt most comfortable erring on the side of safety for the public. With that said, we also did have lengthy discussion about the effect that a beach closure has on our community and just what message that sends to the public, especially around the times that we have special events in the city, specifically events out at Robbins Island. And so there was lengthy discussion of things that we could do, measures that we could take that would better address the problem with the public, educating the public and whatnot as to where the problem emanates from, and to kind of get better word of mouth out there, because as I brought up, this is something that goes back to when I was a child, and anybody who's a lifelong Willmar native knows that that this isn't anything new. Yet when something like this happens, it tends to start to circulate on social media, and the rumor mill starts again, and that is unfortunate. So we did discuss a number of different ways and a number of different measures that could be taken to get that message out to the public. So if anybody else from the board or committee or anybody else has questions regarding that, now would be the time to discuss it.
Councilmember Plowman, I had hoped to attend that, I was unable to attend. I think that I had a concern, and I expressed the concern at the Park and Rec Committee meeting. And my concern on this particular issue is that I too agree that we need to err on the side of safety. But at the same time, one of the jobs of a city or a community is to portray a public image that's positive and consistent with the rest of the state. And the message that we are portraying is inconsistent. I had recommended, I believe, to a number of different people that we simply follow what Candioi County does. Candioi County is not out testing. At the Park and Rec Committee meeting, we were told that the test has to be done on the same day every week because that's the only way to get scientific data. In the document that the council was provided, it says that it's tested on Monday unless it's a holiday, and then they move the date. One of my recommendations is that if we have a heavy rain event, move it back a day. And I was told that was not possible. But now in the document that we have in front of us tonight, it says that we in fact do that. And so one of the things is conflicting information that I've received, which is troubling. But the other thing that's troubling is the fact that, we're not doing what everybody else does. And my concern arose out of the fact that the last 2 years, we get a front page story from the West Central Tribune talking about how great Robbins Island is and all the good things happening, to be followed immediately by staff closing the beach because of high fecal content, because there's just been a big rain. And then we have signs all over out there saying, our beach is closed. I've talked with the city administrator at length about this. And, he reminds me of the situations that have happened down in the metro and how they've had the beaches closed for long periods of time, and Minnetonka over the 4th of July. But we have a duty to our citizens to keep a calm in the community and to cause undue concern or alarm. In my old days as emergency management individual, was something you didn't want to do, particularly as an elected official. It was one thing they taught you when you went through your training, is that you don't cause undue concern to your community if you want a successful community. So I speak very strongly against this. I think we should follow what Candioi County does. That was one of the recommendations on the CAR form, Council Action Form. I said I was willing to go to the bat for this, and I am willing to go to the bat for this, but I certainly would also pause for anybody else that would have comments in regards to that. And I'll follow the direction that council wishes. I think Andrew's running it at this point.
Go ahead, Audrey. Fernando.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I read in one of our emails that another city was doing to control a bird population to their water towers, they were using these inflatable dancing things. And as I understand it, that fecal content is as a result of the geese trashing our beach. And I don't know if this is possible, and I might have to go into the budget next year, but maybe we got to try to keep the birds away, and maybe we have to use those inflatables that you see in front of a business that dance around, to just a suggestion to think about down the road.
Thank you. I spoke in favor of continuing the policy. I can't speak to the days that the testing is being done other than a consistent pattern. But I think we also very clearly said we should be proactive in trying to change some of the behaviors that are causing this when it comes to geese. this discussion took place at the Community Ed and Rec, I think, when I came on the council, and there were suggestions then, and none of that was implemented. Some of them have dollars to them, some of them don't. That was something that staff was receptive to taking a look at. But I do think it's important for us to recognize that there is an issue at that beach, and for us to stop the testing and say that that issue has gone away, it hasn't. And so I think I would encourage us to be proactive to make some changes to it versus just not doing the testing. And if there's adjustments in the schedule, I think that's a staff decision, but we had a lengthy conversation about plantings and shoreline and variety of things. And so I would encourage us to look at that for the season next year versus just discontinuing the policy. And I believe we were told by staff, how long has this been done? How long have we been doing it? I don't remember the time frame, but it's been a long time. It's over 20 years, the mayor is saying. So for us to just quit now, I don't see why we would do that.
Can I jump back in? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that is one thing that I left out. It was the details of exactly what we discussed. Beyond just the communication aspect with regards to the community, we also did discuss, okay, well, beyond that, we got to try to tackle the heart of this problem if it's something that we want to get rid of, because you can tell everybody the reasoning behind it. You can educate people all the time, but is that going to make the problem go away? No. So I don't believe the intent, and we didn't discuss it as such that we were just going to stick with the policy and then the issue was not going to be discussed again for the foreseeable future. I think it's kind of a work in progress. Some investigation and research is going to be done regarding geese and how to handle a goose population, specifically around the area. But then also, we did have discussion. We had the individual who does the water testing was there and provided us with pretty good information regarding why they do the tests and how they do the tests and just why it's so important. And so I was left with the impression that the information that we were getting was solid and that they had solid basis for what they were doing. And I do believe that, or it was my understanding anyways, that the issue is not to be left alone, but we are going to have suggestions and recommendations brought back to us, including the possibility of maybe changing the policy to something like, instead of a beach closure policy, something in the realm of like swimming not recommended, and here's why. And that was still on the table as of our discussion. I don't believe that was off the table. It's just where we left it. We did not want to make alterations to the policy as it stands.
When you have something like this, public safety is also a very big concern that we're supposed to be aware of, so, and be addressing. When you talk about this kind of thing, can there be a general warning that's left up all the time that says after rain and so on that these fecal counts can get high and you're swimming at your own risk, or do we have more of an obligation as a city to make sure that that doesn't happen?
The impression that I was under from Park and Rec and from our administrator and from our individual that's with the wastewater treatment department was that they obviously feel a high level of responsibility to keep the public safe, which is awesome. That's what we need from our staff. That's their first and foremost concern. But they were open to the idea of, okay, maybe a closure policy per se is quite different than an education policy, and making recommendations such as what you just noted. And that could be something that happens either at the time of these incidents or all season long. Like I said, I don't think any of those ideas were off the table, but they have yet to be discussed until some research regarding the birds also is brought back to the table too.
Because with all due respect, I mean, this is kind of what I teach. Whenever time humans try to control where animals are going to live and do their thing, that usually doesn't work out. Animals tend to find a way to do what they do, and that's prime nesting area all around here for large waterfowl. So I think that's a problem we're going to have. Putting a lot of resources into trying to avoid geese from landing on Foot Lake and nesting around the lake seems to be money ill spent, but just my 2 cents worth.
Well, and it was noted at the meeting by a couple individuals that we thought you should have been there because you would have found it quite interesting. And one of the things that was pointed out to us by the individual who does the lab testing was the proximity of where the test sample is taken and the proximity of that area compared to foot traffic of geese. So it's not like they can cherry pick spots in the lake, which might yield quite different results. But they don't want to skew the data and they want to be correct. So, and I have a hard time arguing with that. I don't know if anybody else can. But as mentioned, I was not under the impression that we were just going to say, nope, it's going to stay as it was the last 20 years. We did ask for some information to be researched and brought back, and I think that will bring up a new discussion with some potential ideas. Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
I feel like since we've been doing this testing for so long, if we are to stop now, I don't think anybody is going to feel safe, ever. They'll just feel like we don't know what the fecal count is now, you know? Whereas testing it does give people a sense of safety.
And none of us, I think we can, or I can safely speak for the council that none of us like it. None of us like the problem. This is not a problem that anybody would want to have for their community because that's a showcase, like kind of right in the heart of our town. And so it's not something we want, but I think discussion about it is certainly warranted. More investigation about potential changes and along with potential fixes and whatnot is in order, but at the time we were not comfortable making any significant changes to that policy for the reasons noted. Go ahead, Rick.
So we have to continue to keep the people safe. And if you change it, there's a difference between closure and recommended, no swimming recommended, because you know there's going to be people that'll still go swimming if it says no swimming recommended. So, I mean, so we get a black eye once in a while. I'd rather have the people safe than get sick. And it's becoming more and more throughout the state. You see it in the cities all the time now. So I think people are getting used to it. You got to remember, not everyone that goes to Robbins Island uses the water. So it still gets used. So, but we have to still test the water and keep the people safe.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Because this was our last item. All right, well, that item was for discussion. As mentioned, I do anticipate it will be brought back to a future Public Works meeting. We'll discuss it further, and then it will be brought back to the council for discussion. But we had no other business on that particular night, so I would motion, or we adjourned at 6:40, and I would motion to file the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to file the minutes of the Public Works Safety Committee meeting. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. Next is Finance Committee report for September 5th. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Calvin. Finance Committee met at 5:15 on Thursday, September 5th at the City Office Building. Present was Council Members Nelson, Plowman, and Osmus. Also present was Finance Director Okens, City Clerk Judy Thompson, Planner Sarah Swedberg, and City Administrator Brian Gromitz. We called the meeting to order, and we have 4 action items to bring to you tonight. The first is to set a hearing for weed mowing special assessments. Pursuant to Willmar Municipal Code, Chapter 9, Article 3, concerning the cutting of weeds or grass, and in case of non-compliance, such work to be performed by the city or its agent, The cost thereof can be certified as special assessment against the property concerned. And since there were 6 parcels where noncompliance occurred, staff is asking the committee to recommend to the council to set a public hearing for October 7th at 7:01. It was moved and seconded to recommend that the city council set a public hearing for 7:01 on October 7th, 2019, and I will enter that motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to have a public hearing on weed mowing special assessments for October 7th at 7:01 PM. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The second one was a resolution for a Main Street budget amendment. Main Street is currently pursuing the organization of an event downtown called Touch a Truck and would like to charge business participants in order to cover marketing and staff time. The participant fee is recommended to be set at $100 to participate, with a goal of 16 to 20 businesses. This would allow the event to remain free for all community members to attend and would require a budgetary amendment of $1,600 to record the estimated revenue and anticipated costs. It was moved and seconded to recommend that we introduce a resolution to amend the Willmar Main Street budget by $1,600, and I will enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to amend the Main Street budget by $1,600. Discussion. Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So why would we amend it when they haven't received the money yet? Usually, they get the money and then we amend it, don't they?
I will defer to our finance director.
Mr. Mayor, Chairman Nelson, the reason that they had this, that came before the committee was this was an item that was not programmed in their budget with the grants that they had approved by the council already. This is an additional program, so that's why it was brought to the committee.
So if they get 20, then they have to come back and we have to amend their budget again? 20 sponsors? Because this is 16 to 20, $100 apiece.
This is an estimated revenue neutral type program, so it would be just over budget if they exceeded the amount that they anticipated at 16, both on the revenue side and the appropriation side for marketing.
Additional discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Fagerly,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The next one is a resolution for a preliminary budget for the local option sales tax. The local option sales tax budgets will be proposed and discussed during the 2020 budget process as the tax will be implemented October 1st, 2019. Staff is recommending that a preliminary budget be considered to account for taxes collected in the months of October through December and then reallocated once the project budgets are finalized in 2020. The estimated amount of collections in the 3-month period is estimated to be approximately $750,000. It was moved and seconded to recommend a resolution to set the preliminary budget for the local option sales tax at $750,000, and I will enter that resolution now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to set a preliminary budget for local option sales tax projects at $750,000. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Nelson,
Aye.
Fagerly,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus,
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The next one is a resolution to reappropriation of funds for the Dorothy Olson Aquatic Center. The 2019 capital improvement program includes $200,000 for the Dorothy Olson Aquatic Center pool resurfacing project. Bids were requested to replace the pool plaster finish and provide and install a pH adjustment system and opened on April 25th. Since the bids were significantly higher than budgeted, the project was rebid and adjusted to include replastering the pool tile, and alternates included were the acid-right pH control system, a poolside climbing wall, and concrete for the patio deck. Bids were opened Wednesday, September 4th at 1:30. The Public Works Safety Committee recommended awarding the base bid with alternates B and C in the amount of $243,447 needed to fund the shortfall. We need to fund the shortfall of $43,447. After the discussions between the city engineer and the finance director, staff was recommending that the excess dollars from the Pro Patch trailer be reappropriated to cover the shortfall. It was moved and seconded to recommend a resolution to reappropriate $43,447 from the Pro Patch trailer to the Aquatic Center resurfacing. And I will enter that resolution now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Councilmember Fagerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is this work all going to be done this fall, or some this spring and some this fall?
Yeah, Councilmember Fagerly, the idea of getting this done now is that they would get in and do some of that this fall and then finish up in the spring before we put water back in it.
Okay.
And so we've actually even talked to the contractor shortly after the bids were open, and he asked how soon he could get in. And so I've got documentation with me tonight. I mean, he could get in as soon as a signature is on the paper, so.
Okay, because we talked about it last year, and some said get it done in the fall, and then some said wait till the spring, so.
Yep.
Pool part,
Right, the pool part that was recommended right ahead of water in the pool will be done in the
in
spring.
the spring, okay.
But they would like to get in and do some of the other stuff now if they can.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know who would know the answer to this, but did this bid come in less than the previous bid?
Members of the council, they came in very similar to what they did last time. It's hard to gauge that because I changed the alternates on it. And so to say, is it the same or less or more, it's difficult because I tried to, the fact that I was bidding the same project and anticipated the same bidders, I tried to change the alternates a little bit so that they didn't think I had, that each other had each other's numbers. I would say it came in very similar, and we actually pulled out one of the alternates, which is why we're down to where we are.
Councilmember Nelson.
I was going to answer yes and no, because I do think the bids were better, but there is still an item that needs to be completed, and that was a concern with making sure that that is something that we look at for next year. And I believe there had been a discussion about needing to put that money in the budget for next year to be able to do this. This gets this part done, but there still will be a part that needs to be done next year.
Right. That's in the proposed budget that I'll be presenting tonight. Additional discussion. Thank you. Roll call.
Councilmember Fagerly,
Aye.
Maskey,
Aye.
Schwantes,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Alvarado,
Aye.
Osmus,
Aye.
Plowman,
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nays.
That resolution passes. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. The last is just discussion items. The committee reviewed and discussed the recommendations for updating the city purchasing policy. The recommendations would basically change the policy to follow Minnesota Statute 471.345. This way, as the state changes the statute, the policy would be automatically changed, and the council would not have to take action to amend. Staff was directed to place this item for action at the next meeting to give us time to review. The council then discussed the upcoming meeting schedule and directed staff to schedule special meetings to discuss the preliminary tax levy for September 26th, inviting the whole council for input. Also scheduling the November 21st regular meeting with full council input to recommend a final budget for the December 2nd Truth and Taxation meeting. There was no other business to come before the committee, and I will enter a motion to approve the minutes now.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. I'd like to welcome a member from Boy Scout Pack 224. I was going to recognize you earlier in the meeting. I apologize for that, but we're glad you're here. I'm sure you're working on your community badge, so thank you for being here. And is this one of the Heck Boys? All right, okay, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you. If you have any questions about what's happened here tonight, you can ask Councilmember Meske. He can explain it to you. Okay, next we have Community Development Committee report for September 9th. Councilmember Davis sat in for Councilmember Fagerly, so Councilmember Davis, if you do the report, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Community Development Committee met on September 9th in the city office building. Present were Councilmember Davis, Meskey, Schwantes, and Alvarado. Others present were Dave Ramstad, Brian Grammons, and Sarah Swedberg. The meeting was called to order at 5:15. There were no public comments. Staff first informed the committee that the city had already approved the tax abatement for AEHM Sweet Livin' to construct a new 24-unit apartment building, and that the last step in the process was to review and approve the revised resolution and agreement between the city and AEHM LLC. Mr. Mayor, may I call Ms. Swedberg up to explain this to us?
Mayor, members of the council, as Councilmember Davis had mentioned, you have seen this tax abatement before. This is for the project up by Ridgewater College. Up there, there's currently two 12-unit apartment buildings. Some of you may recall it as the Sunwood Apartments. Sweet Living earlier this year had purchased that property and proposed to build an additional 24-unit apartment complex. In order to do so, they requested tax abatement for 10 years at 90% of only the increased tax base from the addition of that building. There was some renovations going on at the other two 12-unit apartment complexes that were already present on site, and the additional tax revenue from those improvements would not be included in this tax abatement. And that approved tax abatement could range from nothing to around $87,000 over that 10 years. As mentioned, the last two items that need to occur to move forward with this project is first a motion to approve the tax abatement resolution amending, correcting, and restating resolution number 19068. And just in brief summary there, part of our discussion at council was not to make the tax abatement approval on the city contingent upon the county's approval. As some of you might be aware, the county did not approve tax abatement for this particular project, but that because of that decision to remove that contingency doesn't affect anything from the city level. The main difference between tax abatement and TIF is that the three taxing jurisdictions, city, county, and school district, are all separate in tax abatement. So each can approve or deny tax abatement when requested, whereas TIF all kind of falls under the city's jurisdiction in this case. The second recommendation is to adopt a resolution to approve the tax abatement agreement with AEHM LLC and authorize the mayor and city administrator to execute that attached version thereof. And that basically just states that the developer agrees to complete the project that they have requested tax abatement for, that they'll have insurance during that time, and those sort of details.
Any questions for Sarah? Thank you. All right, so then we had a motion made by Councilmember Schwantes and seconded by Member Meskey to approve the resolution. And I will now introduce that resolution.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a resolution amending and correcting and restating the resolution number 19-068 as described by Councilmember Davis and Sarah Swedberg. Additional discussion. Councilmember Osmus.
Thank you. Did the county give any reason why they turned down?
Ms. Swedberg.
They would be better to address that, but I think it just was not a scope that they felt that tax abatement was something they wanted to approve for. There's nothing in our policy that was prohibitive of that. And Aaron Backman is here. He would be able to give a little bit more detail on that. But from a city standpoint, there's nothing that says that that's against the policy that we've set forth.
Mr. Beckman?
Yes. In terms of the county's action, the tax abatement for a housing project is an eligible activity for the county. Historically, the county has approved tax abatements for commercial and industrial projects, and they have not approved tax abatement for housing projects. And so one of the discussion points was that, that traditionally they've limited to that. I think there were other considerations as well, but that was what was highlighted at the meeting.
I had also had a conversation with some of our local county commissioners and asked them their reasoning. And that would affirm what Aaron had said to us. They just felt that tax abatement should not be used for housing, but should be used for industrial or manufacturing positions. And they're wanting to be much more careful with what they are using the abatement for as a tool. And so what the two members I talked to told me is they're not against housing. They want to make that clear. It's just that they don't believe that it's a good use of the abatement tool in the toolbox to use it. So that's why these two particular people said that they had voted the way they did. One of the things that was out there is that there was only one county commissioner that was against it. I think they had a very detailed report, and I think they all voted against it. I don't think anybody voted for it, did they? Do you remember? Right, so they all voted against it. Right. Additional questions?
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Alvarado?
I just want to, I guess I'm leery about using this tool in the toolbox for this project. I mean, or going forward for projects similar to this. I know we need housing, I'm for housing, but I think there's certain tools that are allowed for this, and I don't know, to me, if this is the right tool for this project. So I would ask us to carefully consider this going forward, using this tool in the toolbox. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments, Councilmember Davis?
I second what Councilmember Alvarado said. That's my feelings too.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to remind the council that this particular developer came to the council and talked about this project and asked, before they invested any funds in it, is this something that the council agreed with? And we said, yes, we did. And so then this came again before us, and the council approved it. So and perhaps you're saying in the future and not necessarily for this particular project, but this is a tool in our toolbox. And I wholeheartedly support this.
Councilmember Maskey.
We did have that conversation about it being a tool in the toolbox and that it can be remaining as an option, and we're using it now, which we have not really done, to see how it works, but maybe we will not employ it in the future. We talked about a lot of futuristic conversation, so I'm willing to try this on this particular piece. I was very much reluctant, but I'm willing to give this a try now, but I would not want to see this turn into sort of an open door avalanche of proposals for this type of thing. I think it's one that you have to use with discretion, and I think this has been vetted as a good first example to use it. So I would be in favor of it this time.
Additional discussion. Councilmember Alvarado.
To address Councilmember Schwantes, the majority voted for it, but it wasn't a strong majority. There were a few of us that disagreed with it. So to say that we all approved, I don't think that's fair either. I think that there were some that were opposed, and it went forward. But that's how the process works. Thank you.
Okay, so the question in front of us is amending, correcting, and reinstating the resolution, restating the resolution number 19-068, and let's speak to the question. Councilmember Nelson. But it's your hand up.
I was asking for clarification because we did approve this as a council, and we are now making an amendment to that resolution, correct?
That's
Correct. Everything in your packet, there's 4 pieces of paper. The first 2 is that new resolution that will be adopted, and the second 2 show the markups of what's changing. Essentially what happened was there were just a couple clarification pieces that were needed so that in our records, everything was very clear and accurate as to that original resolution and the intent of what was passed. And so that this first part is just amending that resolution that was already passed, yes.
Additional questions? Okay, the resolution is to, or the motion is to amend, correct, and reinstate, or the resolution number, shouldn't have even tried, 19-068. Roll call.
Councilmember Meske.
Aye.
Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
No.
Alvarado.
No.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
That resolution passes. The next, I'm sorry, Councilmember Davis.
A second motion was made by Councilmember Schwantes and seconded by Councilmember Muskie to approve the tax abatement agreement with AEHM LLC and authorize the mayor and city administrator to execute the revised version. And so I will introduce that resolution now.
Second.
Resolution has been introduced and seconded to approve tax abatement agreement with AEHM LLC and have the mayor and administrator sign on behalf of the city. Discussion. Roll call.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Aye.
Davis.
No.
Alvarado.
No.
Osmus.
Aye.
Plowman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Fagerly.
Aye.
Meske.
Aye.
6 ayes, 2 nays.
That resolution passes as well. Councilmember Davis.
Staff highlighted some of the department's current activities for the committee, which included the recent submittal of city application to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, that the department continues to its search to fill the permit technician clerk position, that Sarah attended her first class of the 2019 Vision 2040 Leadership Cohort Program, and that the department has thus far processed 399 permits to date for a total overall development value of $47 million, of which $43 million, or 90% worth of said projects, are currently being processed at City Hall, and that construction volume is categorized as follows: 8.5% retail, 27.6% institutional, 34% industrial, 29.7% multifamily housing. In addition, it was mentioned that the construction documents for the second phase of the legacy development has been submitted. There being no further business to come before the committee, the meeting was adjourned. And I move that we file these minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to file the minutes. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Next, we have, Sarah, I just want to tell you thanks for your report, and Aaron as well. Thanks for those clarifying points, so I appreciate that. Next, we have the Labor Relations Committee of September 9th. Councilmember Meske.
Yes, the Labor Committee did meet September 9th. All of our normal members were there that normally show. First item for us to discuss this evening is consideration of the Deputy Fire Chief position. That position we have addressed before. I will say it's not super controversial, but it was controversial to some extent of whether it would be in this budget or next. But what we looked at was the actual position itself, the position description. I'll ask HR Director Beckman if you'd like to come up and kind of go through the thing itself, but I will add, when we first talked about this particular piece, we had asked that the mayor, city administrator, and the fire chief get together to talk about this position. It's my understanding that those conversations did not happen. However, this was put into the budget that we will hear later for 2020. with, that is, do not interpret that as there was an agreement to the position. The mayor believes that decision should be made by the council, and by putting it into the budget, it does put that in the council's hands. And so, Ms. Beckman.
Yep, so this was a continuation of our discussion, as you said earlier, about adding a deputy fire chief position in 2020. So I'll try to summarize from our minutes. But we have the job description, the justification for the position, and the position was scored as well, are all in your packet. And just with the increased population of Willmar, the increase in commercial and inspection growth, emergency management protocol, and the training and public education requirements has all just escalated the need to add a full-time deputy fire chief in the budget. And there was further discussion, I know, between the administrator and the fire chief and the mayor. I think it all happened over email rather than an in-person meeting. But they all discussed the funding sources and how that would look in 2020. And I think the consensus at the end was that it was approved for 2020 if the council approves that budget.
All right, well, the motion that came, I was looking at the minutes, because we didn't have a date on it. I know staff has a recommendation of a date, but in light of some of the discussions that were happening and maybe not everybody being on the same page, the only thing that the Labor Committee did approve was the job position. And so I would make a motion to approve that job position as delivered in your packet.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the job description as presented. And I believe what you're asking for is that the position be approved, but not the starting date.
Yeah, that can be determined when we deal with the budget, because what we talked about was the position itself, and I am still completely in support of the position, the job description that's here. But we never talked about any start dates and things, and since that's totally dependent on the budget, I think we should let that be dealt with the budget.
Okay. That clarification. Any other questions from the council? Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. Councilmember Meske.
The second item for your consideration is the city clerk job description. Again, something we've talked about before. It is here, the major change that is the discussion is, of course, the job description and the changes that are in it. With those changes, that job has been rescored, and it moves from a salary range 7 to a salary range 8. You can see the financial impact on there as well. And if you're looking on your laptops, the red is the new language that is put into that job description. And out of the committee, we did move to approve this revised description, and so I would make that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the revised city clerk job description. Discussion. So again, we are simply approving the city clerk job description, and none of the other issues are being resolved at this time. It's just a job description.
Correct.
Council understands that? All in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries as well. Councilman Meske.
The next piece is just for information. We did discuss here last time that we were looking at the employee education program policy. We're going to continue to do that. Remember, at first, we didn't know we had one as a committee. We found out we did have one. And after reading that, it is in desperate need of some updating. We're still talking about delivering copies in triplicate to different offices and so on. So we will be looking at that at a future meeting. The next piece that we had looked at is actually adopting a employee engagement program and putting money and recommending money for that in the 2020 budget. I think I will ask HR Director Beckman to discuss that option, because we had talked about some options and made some suggestions, and we'll see where staff landed on which program they were looking to do, if we did, or if we're still just looking at a budget total.
We did talk about different options. We mostly zeroed in on the insights option. It was something that I'm semi-familiar with, but also our administrator had used previously at New Ulm, and they'd instituted it citywide for all of their employees. So we've had several discussions about it, and if we could implement something like that here at the city of Willmar. So that is the specific one that we discussed. There were other options brought up to me by some other council members that I will follow up on, but the consensus we came to at the end was we wanted to offer some program next year at the city. So they wanted to set aside the funds for now, and we can determine the exact program that we want to use and to what extent we'll roll it out once we get into 2020.
And I'll add that we thought it was very important that it involves department heads as well as staff, and maybe even consider farther reaching even to the council level. And what the committee discussed was recommending the approval of $20,000 to the 2020 budget for such an engagement program, and I'll enter that motion now.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to consider $20,000 into the 2020 budget for consideration of employee engagement services. Discussion. Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand after some research what an employee engagement system is, but prior to that, I did not have very much knowledge about what that was. So maybe for those that may read this or hear about it on the radio or watch the meeting, could somebody maybe summarize just a real brief synopsis about what a system like this is and what it does?
Sure. So an employee engagement system or program is used to do exactly that, engage your employees and make them more invested and interested in their work. I wish I can provide next time. I do have a lot of stats on as far as the amount of work employees get done versus when they're engaged, when they're connected with coworkers, when they feel connected to their job and what they're doing and they know the overall goal. And just having engaged employees can make a world of difference compared to more passive employees who are just more interested in punching the clock, for lack of a better word. But yeah, an employee engagement system helps to improve communication between employees and customers, and it really is a far-reaching program. It's more than just a communication tool. That was a lot of information, but.
Additional comments or questions? Councilmember Maskey.
Well, I will add that this is one of those things we didn't want to have the one day and done routine. We wanted to see this actually be implemented for the long term, where we can see some actual utility for the day-to-day work of our employees. So I know a lot of people will do one of these things at a workshop or something, or this in-service day, but this is something that we truly want to see implemented over a longer period of time.
Councilmember Plowman.
Thanks. If I may just follow it up. I assume this is the case, but it has to be asked, and you don't have to have any specific numbers or anything like that. But I assume systems like this they have pretty good results in terms of employee usage long-term, as opposed to being a piece of software that's put in place, used for a little while, and then people become disinterested with it?
Exactly. It's a long-term goal. If you just do 1 month worth of investing in the information, then it will drop off very quickly. It needs to be an investment in an ongoing, continuous conversation that you have with the employees. It'd be a one-time implementation cost up front, and then obviously for new employees as they're hired, you'd need to continue getting the evaluations done. But then after that, it's a continuing thing you can do in-house. It's not necessarily a continuous cost, but once we have the program and we have the employees, this one specifically, we'll still decide which one we use eventually, but this one specifically categorizes employees into 4 different categories. And then from there, you can break them down into even more detailed categories. You can make it as complicated as you want it to be. So there is a lot of information you can build off and dig into as far as how you communicate with each other and your supervisors and those who report to you. But yes, long-term is the goal, and that's when you see real results.
All right, great. I hope it's successful. Thank you.
I just have two personal experiences of this type of a service. When I worked at the city of Burnsville, we did not have this type of a system in place, and we employed this type of a system. And employee morale went through the roof. As our HR director has stated, if you make the commitment, and it's not a one and done, like Councilmember Maskey said, you get what you put into it. I think you just have to go across the parking lot here over to Midwest Technology. I mean, you walk into their building, you can tell what every person's strength is. And so if you need someone with a particular bent on how they do business, you can walk to that cubicle, find out who that person is that you may not have that bent, and then you can collaborate and your projects work better and smoother together. So that was one of my examples. The other is an example, and so I developed a leadership program for the state of Minnesota that is currently used by the entire state for the whole fire service. And so I would encourage you to look at Strength Finders, because Strength Finders is what we vetted through the Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training Education. And that program has been used successfully, and all of the firefighters in the state of Minnesota at the leadership level are being taught through Strength Finders. And so I have a little bit of favoritism to the fire service, as Chief Hansen knows, but so that has worked very successfully there. But I think one thing I heard both Councilman Meskey say and our HR director say both, we need something that our administrator is comfortable with. And it needs to be a tool that the administrator that we have feels comfortable with, because the administrator and the HR director are the two that are going to be driving the bus on this deal. And so they have to be, they have to be the ones that really tell us which type of a tool we use. Because if they don't believe in it, then the employees won't believe in it. So Councilman Meskey.
I was going to let you know, StrengthsFinder is one of the other ones that she was looking at, so.
Oh, okay.
It is on the list.
It's on the list, okay. So you can call Steve Flaherty at the MBFD, and he'll tell you how successful that program is. So we have a motion and a second to consider an employee engagement process for the 2020 budget. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. Councilmember Meskey.
The next is, as we've been going through the personnel policy, we are now to section 7 as far as our counting is concerned. This one doesn't have a lot of changes. It's about a lot of different types of leave. I think I would ask, I'm sorry you sat down, but I think I asked HR Beckman just to talk about the unpaid leave piece that was different, because I believe the rest of them are according to state statute.
Yes, the one section that will make a change is that first paragraph in the unpaid leave. We have set the requirement that employees need to use their paid time off before they can go on an unpaid leave. And the one exception to that would be if they are on FMLA or parental leave. It would allow them to keep a balance of 40 paid hours in their bank. So they have that as a cushion when they are able to return back to work. So that's the one change from what's been previously approved.
And so the committee was comfortable with all of these, and we would move their approval, and I'll enter that motion at this time.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to consider section 7 of the employee personnel policy. Discussion. Councilman Meskey.
Just to add one point of all these, this is where it was very glowing that we have a lot, or apparently we have a lot of things in the policy manual that just reiterate what's in state statute. And so we were going to do it here, but we decided that we'll probably wait until all the policies are approved and then go back, and those that are already addressed by state statute probably just have a link within the document that employee could go and hit it, and it would take it to the state statute, so we don't have to have 10 additional pages explaining what is already reiterated in state statute. So it is approved now, but I would imagine when we are finished with the whole process, we'll go back through, and if it's already stated in state statute, we'll probably have a link in it, because all employees receive this electronically.
Additional discussion. All in favor of the motion to consider personnel policy section 7, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. Councilmember Meskey.
All right, our last one was that we did receive section 8. We did include section 8 here with yellow highlights. If you have any questions, concerns, or so on, please get that to a member of the Labor Committee so we can bring it to our next meeting for discussion. That was the end of our meeting, so with that, I would move that we file the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to file the minutes of the Labor Relations Committee for September 9th, 2019. Discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion does carry. Next, we have consideration of a resolution to adopt the Planning Commission's findings and deny temple rezone of land from ag to general business. Ms. Swedberg. Also in attendance, we have, I believe, the petitioner, and we also have the chair of the Planning Commission, Mr. Steve Gardner. Ms. Swedberg.
Mayor, members of the council, pull up my page here. Tonight before us, we have a request for a rezone that Planning Commission has reviewed and is recommending denial. Some history on this piece. This piece is out on Civic Center Drive, southeast of the Midwest Technology Campus, kind of right on the bend there as you're coming north. The property was annexed into the city in 2007 in anticipation of a heating fuel, biofuel pelletizing plant that never came to fruition. In 2008, as the current comprehensive land use plan was being drafted, the Planning Commission initiated a rezoning of this property and some surrounding area from I-1 or light limited industrial to ag, putting it in a holding zone so a broader plan for this area could be put into place. That broader plan, as discussed in the 2009 Comprehensive Land Use Plan, is for commercial and industrial uses to the south, all the way along Highway 12 east, and transitioning to residential uses in the north as you go along Lakeland Drive and further east from Lakeland, north to Civic Center Drive there. The Planning Commission has received several inquiries about this parcel over the past year, while the Commission has never received a formal request. And so at this time, we have received that formal request. While the Commission is in agreement that they envision kind of a commercial node in this area near the Highway 71 bypass, due to the proximity of that intersection of Civic Center Drive and Highway 71 there, after a very lengthy discussion, they unanimously recommend denial of this rezone request due to the findings found in the attached resolution 2019-04. And so in summary of that resolution, the Planning Commission found that this rezoning would not be consistent with the comprehensive plan that encourages full development of existing industrial and commercial land and recommends orderly development occur where a full complement of utilities can be provided. While the property is currently served by the city's centralized water and electric systems, the nearest sanitary sewer system service is located in the intersection of Civic Center Drive and Lakeland Drive Northeast, approximately 2,700 feet away, which is about half a mile. There's significant cost to extending that sanitary sewer line approximately 2,700 feet, especially if that extension only services this one parcel. Due to the elevations in this area, an extension of that sanitary sewer line would only service this triangle piece of land as found in that map in your packet. Whereas the large 60-acre parcel between the mobile home park and this triangle piece that we're discussing is higher in elevation than what that line would be. So this line could not service that 60-acre parcel, which is largely part of the complication with this site. Not to mention that this site does have contamination concerns. It's currently owned by the Candiota Power Cooperative, where they used to treat some of their utility poles. And so there is some covenants and restrictions on this particular site of a very particular piece of area. The city, by all means, if rezoning this land and allowing development on this piece, would not assume that liability in any way, shape, or form. That would be a decision of the developer and the landowner of that time. So staff recommends a motion to adopt a resolution adopting the Planning Commission's findings and denying the rezone. I will note that there is an alternative option, and that would be to introduce an ordinance, which I have included in your packet, to rezone the property from ag to general business, to set a public hearing on October 7th, and administratively extend the 60-day rule. There's a rule in state statute that requires Planning Commission and council action be taken within 60 days of receiving an application. Because of the extended review time that Planning Commission needed, if we were to set that public hearing, we would be just a few days after that 60-day rule, which is just a letter to the applicant to notify them that we'll be going beyond that 60 days.
Motion?
Oh, no.
Anybody willing to make a motion, or do you want to discuss it first? Councilmember Fagerly.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what's allowed in general business then?
Here's the other caveat. So general business is our most open zone commercially in the city. It allows everything from retail to office to all sorts of other things. This particular applicant would be requesting office and storage space for a power washing and painting commercial company. Planning Commission would like the council to know that if you did move forward with rezoning, they would highly recommend a limited business instead of the general business that's being requested, because the limited business is much more characteristic to the Midwest Technology Campus, which is adjacent just across the road from this particular piece. And so limited business would allow for more oversight of the Planning Commission in the sense that everything requires at least a plan review, if not a conditional use permit, which is identical to the technology zone.
So they could still go there if we rezoned it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, if they rezoned it, either as general business or as limited business, this use would be allowed. Under general business, this use would be allowed outright, which means that there's no permissions they'd need. They would just need building permits and approval from engineering. And then if they were in limited business, they'd have to come back to Planning Commission for a plan review, which is similar to a conditional use permit, but there's no public hearing that would have to take place. So it's a little bit less time consuming, less of a fee, less staff time, that sort of situation. Part of the discussion that Planning Commission had was about the availability of sanitary sewer. There is allowance, and I've included that section of the zoning ordinance in your packets for exceptions to being connected to sanitary sewer if certain conditions are met. It has been city engineering and planning decision or essentially decision that this situation, while cumbersome, does not meet necessarily the requirements to allow that variance from connecting to sanitary sewer, because it's in the public interest for all properties to be connected to those city services. And so as the zoning ordinance reads, city sanitary sewer and water facilities shall be utilized whenever such facilities are available or can be made available by extensions, which prove to be both feasible, economical, and in the best interests of the city. Where unavailable, a proper system of sewage treatment, disposal, and water supply conforming to the standards and requirements of the city engineer, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and the Minnesota State Department of Health shall be employed. And we would ensure, if that rezoning and this development did take place, there would have to be very close conversation with MPCA and the Department of Health because of those covenants on this land, especially pertaining to groundwater. We would want to ensure that either there's some sort of proper holding tank or that septic system was up to their standards because of that concern of groundwater contamination.
So a holding tank could work, a big one, or a mound system until public sewer is affordable.
It could, and I would defer, if allowed, to Public Works Director Sean Christensen.
Members of the council, I would say the first part of the statement was correct. A holding tank, yes, but a mound system, no, because a mound system is essentially a leach field that's above ground. So what is not allowed is the leach field aspect of that septic. So a holding tank, sure, but nothing that leaches into the existing soil.
So depending how big the holding tank is, and I'm not even sure how big they are, they may have to pump every other day or once a week, or depending how much use it gets. What do we do at the airport? We just have holding tanks out there, right?
Yeah, and I don't
Doesn't get
remember how
used
often
that
we
much?
pump. I don't remember how often we pump that, Councilmember Fagerly, but yeah, it's holding tanks there as well. And there's a number of them in town, and we have permitted uses that are allowed to come into our wastewater treatment plant, and they're on a almost an inspection type process, with the wastewater treatment personnel that fill out a permit, and there's a fee to dump that into the wastewater, so, because we're paying to treat it. And then they do regular checkups on those.
What was that wood chipping plant that was gonna go there? What were they going to do?
I couldn't tell you that. I'm not entirely sure. That's,
Okay.
I don't know how many years ago that was. It's been
That's a long
while.
time, yeah.
It was in your packets. I do believe that there was some discussion about some sort of holding tank or septic tank at that time, but it was never officially decided.
Yeah, because they never went through with it, so. Okay. I'll make a motion to rezone. GI, is it? Or GB?
It would be a motion to introduce the ordinance for rezoning.
Oh, just a rezone.
Yep, it would be that alternative option number 1, introduce an ordinance to rezone the property and set a public hearing on October 7th.
Okay.
I thought you wanted a general business limited.
Robert, you might have to help me here. If the request was submitted as general business, can they hold a public hearing to rezone it from ag to limited business instead?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, this rezoning issue is really at its heart a legislative determination by the council. If you think that an application to rezone to general business would be more appropriate as limited business, you have that discretion. I would note that the ordinance in your packet was written as an alternative option. It does specify the rezoning would be to limited business. But again, this is a council policy question.
General.
Well, you can always change it. You can go for general business, and then at the public hearing, you could go to limited.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's planning, if the council chooses to take that alternative route instead of denying the rezone, it was Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone it to limited business because of its similar characteristics to the technology zone, which is what the technology campus is zoned as. So it would be an introduction to rezone from ag to limited business, not general business, as the CAR states, is what's in the packet, either way.
Okay, so I have a motion on the table, but I want a clarifying question to Robert Scott, our city attorney. So if we rezone it to general business and then we want to rezone it to general business limited, is that then another 30 days and another publishing?
Mayor, members of the council, so the question, which I'll repeat so I have time to think about it, is if after the ordinance has been introduced, if it was introduced as rezoning the general business, can you then change it at the public hearing to limited business, or do you have to go back and republish it? My instinct on that is you actually probably would have to republish it. That would be a substantial change to the ordinance under your charter language. It wouldn't be a statutory requirement, but I think under your charter language, you would need to republish it.
And my concern is that we have made general business such a catch-all that basically everything's allowed under general business. Well, not literally, but I mean, we allow a lot under general business.
There isn't a second, is there?
No, there's not. No, I just wanted that clarification. We don't have a second yet, so there's a motion to introduce a public hearing for rezoning to general business. Is there a second to the motion for discussion? Councilmember, I need a second, or we can't discuss?
I'll pull it back and make a new one. General business limited.
Limited business.
Okay.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded for, help me with the words. I obviously was saying it wrong.
Introduction of an ordinance to rezone property from agriculture to limited business, setting the public hearing for October 7th, and administratively extending the 60-day rule.
So not general business limited, just limited.
Just limited business, yep.
I had it wrong. Okay, so do we have a motion and a second on that discussion? Councilmember Davis.
I just don't know why we aren't going to go with the recommended motion that the Planning Commission
Denying the reason.
denied the rezone.
What you have is you have alternatives that are being supplied by staff and the council, as the city attorney has stated, is it's a legislative decision. So the decision, the recommendation comes from the planning commission, but the council has the ultimate authority. So we are the legislative authority for that. So if the council chooses to change that, they certainly can. If you are not in favor of that, you simply would vote against the motion as presented. But the motion on the table is to have the public hearing for limited business, is what the motion that has been made and seconded. Councilmember Nelson, followed by Plowman.
I'm really questioning why we would go against the Planning Commission's findings. There's an awful lot of detail in here. Also, our recommended motion is saying that staff is recommending that motion also. And so I guess I'd like to hear maybe a follow-up from our staff with why they are agreeing with the Planning Commission. This has been a problem or a property that's been questioned for a long time. I served on the Planning Commission when we went through all sorts of things to try to figure out that plant with that, and just a concern from traffic. I guess long-term, I'd have a concern with what I would see as a spot zoning to what future development might be. But I would like to hear from staff in addition to the Planning Commission, what the Planning Commission has found.
So are you asking specifically of Ms. Swedberg, or are you asking for Dr. Ramsted's opinions as well?
I think there's 3 staff here probably that we need to hear from our city engineer and from Dr. Ramsted and from Sarah.
Okay. So Ms. Swedberg, we'll start with you. We'll go to Dr. Ramsted, and then we'll go to our city engineer. Ms. Swedberg.
Yeah, staff's recommendation for denial is largely based in looking at the review of the comprehensive plan and also upholding what Planning Commission is recommending to council. And so I would refer you to that resolution that was included in your packet from the Planning Commission. It's just after the map that's in your packet for this particular item. I would start on page 2 of that resolution. We'll jump down to 5. The first 4 findings are really that, that the where the location of the property is, that the property is owned by the Candioi Power Co-op, and Daniel Temple has a purchase agreement on that property with KPC, so they're really both applying for that rezone. 3, that there was one person at the public hearing for Planning Commission, that was Daniel Temple. 4, that the purpose of the current zone is for a holding pattern until the timing for the logistical expansion of development for that of municipal utilities presents itself. And then we jump down to number 5. So while general business zoning may promote a higher level of use and use options, present zoning also promotes development occur in an orderly fashion and locate in areas that are currently or soon will be serviced by water, sewer, streets, as found in the 2009 comprehensive plan. Number 6, the subject property is currently served by water, but not by sanitary sewer. Again, the closest sanitary sewer is 2,700 feet away. And the extension to the subject property is not financially feasible at this time. 7, that the proposed rezoning would serve as the beginning of a commercial node, like we talked about, near that intersection of Civic Center Drive and Highway 71 bypass, and would encourage commercial growth and diversified expansion of development of new businesses within the city, and that's fully recognized. However, this location of growth is not consistent with that comp plan. The comp plan encourages full development of existing industrial and commercial land. It recommends development occur in areas where utilities can be provided with optimal efficiency and cost. It recommends orderly expansion of commercial areas. It encourages new development in areas contiguous to existing development. It recommends requirement of a full complement of public utilities, and it affirms the city's desire to serve all residents and businesses with those municipal utilities. And so based on on those findings. The Planning Commission is recommending denial, and it would be from this staff person, it would be recommendation to uphold that Planning Commission recommendation for denial.
Dr. Ramstad. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You did a great job. I concur with all Sarah's points. The site is an isolated island, and the use is going to be an isolated use in an area that doesn't have that use otherwise. The sanitary sewer is a big issue, especially with the tank, and the environmental issues that are at the site all point to, and the use of it as a paint booth type of a property is an environmental concern in itself. Also, just in general, I defer and concur with the Planning Commission. They did their due diligence, they did their homework, they reviewed this carefully, and I back their decision.
Thank you.
To deny.
Public Works Director Christensen.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm not sure what else I can add based on the homework that's been done. I definitely concur with what's been said and the staff recommendation as well as the Planning Commission homework and recommendation.
Yeah, that's the thing we don't have answered yet of your questions.
I would ask our city attorney regarding the spot zoning, that regulations are just clarification of what spot zoning is.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Nelson. And we were asked that question prior to the Planning Commission's public hearing. Is this even legal rezoning? There are circumstances where spot zoning is, spot zoning I think generally is usually illegal. From our perspective, we looked at this and looked at all the different factors, and we thought it's defensible in this case. Had the Planning Commission, I think the Planning Commission has reached a very well-reasoned decision. It's a very sound record to support its recommendation. Had they wanted to go the other way and approve the rezoning, I think this is one of those cases where you can support that decision as well, and that's what I advised staff.
Additional questions? Yeah. Councilmember Plowman, followed by Meske.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my primary question was along the lines of what Councilwoman Nelson asked, specifically why staff was also recommending denial as opposed to a rezone or something like that. But particularly for me, it's difficult because you hear of a new business place, and we welcome business to this community, and we want to be welcome. We want to eliminate all the red tape and all the hassle that can go along with that. However, with that being said, I think this speaks pretty loud and clear to the value, the net value of having a planning commission that is there to do the due diligence for you, and the staff members that are also acting as another firewall beyond the work of what the Planning Commission is doing. And I think given all of the evidence that went through the Planning Commission and their obviously deep and detailed discussion of all of these points and the review of our staff, unless there was something that we're really, really missing, I think it would be unwise to not heed their direction on this one. So that is concurrent with the direction that I would vote. I would vote supporting what the Planning Commission is also recommending.
Councilmember Meske.
I appreciate all the input. I am learning on the fly. Just one last question. As we look through the resolution, this is written as if it were going to be general business. If this motion addresses limited business, would that change any of the whereases or the final conclusions?
No, it really wouldn't. Limited business would still elevate what the use of that property could be. And again, I would iterate, We want to see development in town. It's not that we're trying to be that roadblock in the way for all development, but we also want to be logical and thorough in where we think about development and orderly development. And that's really what it boils down to, I think, more than anything for Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Additional discussion. So a motion on the table to introduce an ordinance to rezone the property from ag to limited business.
Yep.
Limited business, set a public hearing for October 7th. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
That motion fails.
I'll introduce a motion to accept the resolution adopting the Planning Commission findings and deny the rezone.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the resolution adopted by the Planning Commission's findings and deny the rezone. Discussion. All in favor? Councilman Osmus.
Okay, just to try to make this a little clearer for me. And this, this is a business decision on their part. I guess I'm not understanding why this piece of property, why do they want this piece of property when it has the contamination issues? And again, going back to we want to encourage business to come to town, they could go out to the industrial park, correct?
Correct.
Or find any other piece of property. This didn't have anything to do with being next to the spur for anything to go on to the rail yard or?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I will note that the applicant is here tonight, if that's something that you'd like to call up. But no, that the contamination was heavily discussed at Planning Commission as well. And, on one side, the contamination lends itself maybe to a non-residential use, which was recognized at Planning Commission, again, kind of leading into one of those arguments for that commercial node in that area when the time does come. But at this time, there are plenty of other sites in town that would be available for this use that would allow this use either outright or, again, with that plan review, if it was a limited business.
Councilman Osmus, would you like to talk to the petitioner?
Um,
The petitioner, would you like to come forward?
Mayor, council members, thank you so much for taking a few minutes. I recognize this has been a very challenging property for everybody. We've had long discussions at the Planning Commission level. The reason we're interested in the property is for two reasons. Its location is right next to the bypass. Visibility is the number one location that we liked. The price, we got a very good price on it, a lot of it because of the contamination. The contamination was given a clear 15 years ago, so we feel comfortable, putting a small building on there. The property owners, had this as industrial prior to it being agricultural. And there is an article in your packet about, the Planning Commission saying it'd be easy to rezone it later. So they're a little confused as to, they finally get somebody that's willing to take this property and do something with it that's productive. And, we got a lot of pushback. So, it is what it is. We'll find someplace else to put our business. We're not going to give up. But it is difficult to find, good property to work with that's not real expensive, So to answer your question, that would be your answer. Any other questions? I'm happy to.
Councilman Osmus, are there any other questions that you have of the petitioner?
No, I'm glad you had the opportunity to speak and so that you understand we're not wanting to put up roadblocks and we're glad you're looking at putting a business in the community. I'm just trying to understand what's going on with this piece of land.
It's a very unique property, there's really nothing like it in town. You can't put any residential on it because it was once contaminated. You can't really grow anything on it because of that as well. So its only really use is some kind of a business warehouse use. And being in real estate business, we recognize the proximity to the bypass as being a very desirable location. Every other node in the city that bypasses, where the bypass is connected, as general business. And that's why we thought this would be kind of a no-brainer, but clearly we were mistaken. But thank you so much for considering.
Additional comments or questions? Shannon, hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Davis?
No. Or, wait a minute.
So I'm sorry, I should have read the motion. The resolution that has been introduced is to deny, or to follow the Planning Commission's findings and to deny the Temple rezone of land from ag to general business.
Aye.
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Was Councilmember Davis, was it aye?
Yes.
Okay. Alvarado?
So an aye would be to follow the recommendation of the
Planning Commission.
aye.
Osmus?
Aye.
Plowman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Fagerly?
No.
Meske?
Aye.
Schwantes?
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay.
That resolution passes as submitted. Next is Mr. Temple, thank you for being here, and thank you for your comments. And Mr. Gardner, thank you for being here as well. Staff, thank you for your work, appreciate it. Next is consideration of termination of ag leases for the Y parcels. Public Works Director Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Actually, if it's all right with council, I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Scott. He's probably better spoken on this than I am.
Attorney Scott?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. As you're aware, we've been working through issues as they've arisen in order to try and be able to proceed to closing on the sale of the city-owned property to BNSF needed for the Y corridor. One of the issues that has arisen is those parcels, I believe all of them are subject to, or substantially all of them are subject to agricultural leases. Most of them are leased under the city's standard ag lease bidding program. The one located farther south where the sewer parcel intersects the future rail corridor is leased under a different lease that was negotiated specifically with that property owner at the time the city acquired the fee title it needed from him to install the sewer line. Both sets of leases, all leases at issue here, include language saying that the city may terminate those leases if the city decides to sell the property subject to the lease or any portion of it, as the city has done here. So our recommendation is that the City Council pass a simple motion authorizing staff to communicate to these property owners that the leases are terminated. The one issue for the council to keep in mind is none of this property is being farmed, with the exception, of course, of just the parcel where the sewer line intersects the future rail corridor. There's about, I think we figure about 1/6 of an acre of soybean crop in the field right now. We have had even just today, a conference call with MnDOT and BNSF trying to figure out when the closing will be timed. I think the current thinking is the closing won't occur until after harvest. If for some reason those plans are required to change and the city is required to close, there's two options. One would be if the crop is still in the field at closing, BNSF has agreed to permit the property owner to harvest after closing, provided the property owner signs a BNSF permit. If the property owner is unwilling to do that, it is actually possible the city would have to remove those crops on the 1/6 of an acre. And in that case, under the lease, the only liability would be crop damages for those crops. It's everyone's intention here, and I believe the result will be that closing happens after the harvest, and that won't be an issue, but I wanted to make the council aware of it. With that said, the recommendation is to pass a motion authorizing staff to communicate that those leases are terminated. And I'm not sure if I missed a signal. Was the city engineer, did you have something to add?
No, that was not a signal,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
So the recommendation is to consider terminating the ag leases on the Y parcels as outlined by the city attorney and our Public Works Director, Mr. Christensen.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to consider, to terminate the ag leases on the Y parcels as described. Discussion. Councilmember Nelson.
Can I ask Mr. Scott, there's a sentence in here that says the $100 annual rent in the Quam lease would need to be prorated to account for the loss in area available to be farmed in future years. What does that mean?
Under both sets of leases, so with the property owner for the majority of this land, as well as the Quam parcel, which is, again, this less than an acre of property, there's a provision for the, the farmers in possession of this land are paying rent to the city. In the case of Mr. Quam, it's not very much rent. Under both leases, once the lease is terminated with respect only to the area that we're selling to BNSF, you have to prorate the rent for future years because these are multi-year leases and they will remain in effect with respect to much more land than we're selling to BNSF.
So we just have to reduce the rent for that
The rent,
0.8?
yes. In future years, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would be
Doesn't have
prorated.
anything to do with crops that were on the 0.8?
No, the lease says that if there are crops in the field when the city terminates, the city would, and they lose the crops, the city would have to pay crop damages.
Additional discussion. All in favor of the motion to terminate the ag leases on the Y parcels, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion does carry. It should be noted that I announced at the last meeting that there would be a signing process after tonight's meeting. That is being held over because of problems with getting all the documents ready. So we're hoping to be able to do that after the next council meeting. So I told all of you I was going to be doing that after this meeting. That's not going to be happening. It'll be done after the next meeting. With that, we'll present the mayor's proposed budget. I'll start out with City Administrator Gramitz.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. The budget, I think, process got off to a slightly slower start than has been performed in prior years. And we are anticipating that the budget will be presented tonight. You will, Finance will get the budget, well, actually, all the city council and the community will get the budget if they go on our website tomorrow morning and also the city council's Dropbox. So that will initiate the preliminary approval process. We hope to have the city council go through the as normal as possible process, going through finance with the council invited to attend. And at the last day of September, we would adopt the preliminary budget. Now, as I think we're all aware that the preliminary budget can go down from whatever it's set on the 30th, but it cannot go up. There's quite a bit of discussion, I believe, is going to be had on what's in the budget. Even up till tonight, we had an addition to the budget of $20,000 for the employee program. So up to the very minute the mayor is proposing his budget, we were actually, as a council, still including things in it. So it is a fluid type of process, and it'll get worked out as we proceed through this process and conclude on September 30th for the preliminary setting of the levy. And then the finance director has the schedule where we will have our final determination of the budget and approval of the budget so that we can levy the taxes or submit the levy to the county. And that schedule is also being given to the city council so that they know what the upcoming timeline is. So with that, I think we can get to the presentation of the mayor's budget. And Mr. Okens, I think we'll conclude with a few remarks at the very end. As I stated earlier, full budget should be available shortly after 8 o'clock tomorrow morning for the city council and the public.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present the budget to the council for the city of Willmar for the year of 2020. I want to start out with a few opening comments, and one of the things that you'll notice as you look through the handout is that on the street improvement program, we have increased the amount of funds spent for street reconstruction, overlays, and oiling, et cetera, every year for the past 5 years. So the last year that Mayor Yanish was mayor, he had increased the budget by a little over $100,000. And since that time, that budget has been increased every year. This year, in 2020, you will note a significant drop in the amount of streets that we're able to do with the monies that we have in the budget. Last year, I took one-time funding because there were additional streets that we wanted to get done. And what I'm telling you all of this for is for the simple fact that our street reconstruction program is in an untenable position. In the fire service, that's a condition that is immediately dangerous to the facilities that you are operating under and could potentially cause harm to our community. And that's the situation our streets are currently in. This is no fault of our staff. This is no fault of anybody else. It's simply a dollar and cents issue. And so I've been working with staff over the last, since May, trying to develop a program that I was hoping to present to you tonight on how we could change the way we do our street reconstruction programs. I'm a little dismayed that we are not able to offer anything at this point, but I am respectfully requesting that the Public Works Safety Committee and the Finance Committee work collaboratively with the Finance Director and the Public Works Director to find a new process that we can use on how we can replace our streets. One of those options is at the end of our local option sales tax would be to use a sales tax. But we can't wait for 13 years. We have to put a plan in place, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years. And as I stated, I was hoping I was going to be able to present that tonight. The other thing that I'm asking the Finance Committee to look at closely is our wastewater fund balance. If you look in the last 3 years, our fund balance in the wastewater treatment fund has gone from just under 16 million to just under 25 million. And so there's a balloon payment coming of 8 million, but the policy, you're not going to find this in your hands out. This is just ad lib comments by the mayor. You'll find that there's a balloon payment that will be due. So when you look at the documents that Administrator Gramitz talked about, you'll find there's a balloon payment due of $8 million. Even with the $8 million balloon payment, with the amount of dollars that are there, our policy states we need 1 year of capital and we need a half a year of operations. Our capital costs, depending upon how you look at it, are right in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 million a year. And our operating is between 4 and 5 million a year. So those are some things to look at. Now I will go to the handout that you have in front of you. And the first thing that I want to do is that to tell you that similar to what the administrator has already told you, is that at this point, after the mayor presents the budget, it is in the hands of the council. And it's the council's budget from here on out. Up to this point, it's been the mayor's budget. And now it's up to you to take and decide how you want to move this budget forward, what you want added, what you want subtracted, and those types of things. So the important thing to remember is that our revenues are remaining predominantly flat. We've had moderate increases in our valuation, and those numbers are numbers that we get from Candiaway County. They tell us what our taxable market value is, and that is what we look at. So we've had moderate increases in valuation, and that is from new growth and also increase in valuation or decrease in valuation, whatever the case may be. And we've also had a minimal increase in local government aid, and our finance director has reported that to us on a number of different occasions. That's in the tune of just a little over $200,000. But we also have had an increased cost of our infrastructure. Our infrastructure continues to age. We have deferred costs that we haven't kept up with. And with our local option sales tax projects, we will have additional revenues, but the majority of those revenues are going to parks projects, with the exception of the $7 million that will be going to be used on our stormwater projects. The earliest you'll see some of that being requested to be spent is probably in a month or so, when we take a look at the Cambridge project and how that will be, hopefully a solution will be coming to us, but that'll be coming through Public Works Safety. So the proposed budget is under general operating. We've got $19,284,000. Capital improvements is $24,100,000. Special revenue, internal, those are internal dollars. It's a financial transfer between the capital improvements into the operating budget of $4.9 million. We have debt service of a little over $5 million. And we have our enterprise fund, which is our wastewater fund, which I talked about a little bit ago, which is $11 million. So total of all of our funds in the proposed budget for the mayor's proposed budget is $65,689,314. Our operating levy, as it sits in 2019, sits currently at $5,250,000, or a rate of 38.076. In working with the finance director and the city administrator, I was attempting to hold the budget flat and to come in with no increase in the operating levy rate, but with added positions that we've put in, and you all received an email from the city administrator last week defining some of the other areas that we have had to put some dollars in, and so you'll see that there's an increase of 1 point in the levy. And so that 1 point in the levy, I believe it's coming up in a future slide, will bring us a little over $200,000. I'm sorry, $157,000. Not quite that far back. Oh, I should have pointed out the total increase from 2019 to 2020 in the budget is $526,821,000. Our general fund revenues are taxes, which are 33% of our budget, licenses and permits, which are 2.9% of our budget, intergovernmental aid, which includes our local government aid, which is 29.9% of our budget, service charges, which is 3.9% of our budget, fines and forfeitures, which are less than 1% of our budget, interest, earnings, and reimbursements, which is 7.6% of the budget, and other funding sources, which is 12.9% of our budget. And then fund balances, which is 8.9%. Again, we are transferring some of our dollars out of our fund balances into make this project work, and some of that was explained in the email that you received on Friday. Under our general fund expenditures, our city administration is 7.1% of the budget. The mayor and council is 2.2% of the budget. Planning and development, 3.2% of the budget. City clerk and elections is 2.6% of the budget. And remember, again, in 2020, we will have a general election, but we also have the census. And so there are dollars in there for both of those. So you'll see a substantial increase in that. I believe it was right around $160,000 increase on city clerk and the elections and assessing process. Finance, 2.9% of the budget, and non-departmental is 10.7% of the budget. Public safety is 30.3% of the budget. Public Works is 19.3% of our budget. Our library is 2.8% of our budget. And those of you that have been around a little while will remember that the first local option sales tax we had in the city of Willmar had a fund balance. We still have a fund balance in that account of monies that are still sitting there in the library fund. And those dollars are spent at the request of the library board. And the request from them is to use those dollars to assist with repairing their roof. And so that will be coming to future future Finance Committee meetings through the labor and through the Candioi County. Our community partners, and those are things like Meals on Wheels and Willmar Fest and those types of activities. $5,000 again is in the budget for the, $3,000 is again in the budget for Highway 23. Then we have recreation, which is a new fund area for us, as you'll recall. We had to do a lot of redoing of our budgets to make this happen, and that is 9.6% of our budget. And transfers in is 8.8% of our budget. So some of the changes that we have in 2020 is the CARES Health Debt Service of $3.7 million. Our local option sales tax projects, we're projecting that in the budget of $9.8 million, so just under $10 million. Our City Hall, I placed that in the budget at $8.5 million. The thing to remember on the City Hall project is that with City Hall, the first year of debt, there is no payment for debt service. And so your first expenditure for the City Hall project would not be until 2021, unless the Finance Committee chose to do something different there. Community Development Block Grant that we talked about a little bit earlier today, $3.3 million. We've had an increase in our health insurance. The preliminary numbers at 35% increase in our health insurance costs. And that's due to the bargaining agreements that we have in place. As you remember, it's a 2-year agreement, and our insurance was to remain the same through that. And so staff is currently working on that, number one, to negotiate with our insurance provider, but then number two, also having conversations with our staff, which you're all aware of. Where I have included in this budget 2 additional positions, an assistant fire chief and an additional accounting clerk position. And for rough math, and these are not rock solid numbers, but for rough math, figure each of those positions are worth $100,000. And the $100,000, of course, is not the salary that we pay, but there are associated costs with those. Also, in addition to that, there are 2 intern positions. One of those interim positions is again back in our HR department, and the other position is in our planning and development services. And those would be at the direction of those 2 department directors if those positions stay in. They're putting it at $10,000 per position. If those positions remain in, those would be positions that would be at the direction, if the budget is approved, of the director to hire and put them in and use them as they felt best used. I did not provide any guidance to staff members specifically, although we did provide direction to the city administrator and the finance director that I felt that particularly the work that we saw done this year with our labor intern, that those dollars are very well spent. For capital planning for 2020 through 2024, again, the criteria that we use is the number one point getter, and you guys have all been through this many times. Well, some of you many times, but most of you at least once now. Legal mandate gets the highest score on a capital project. Maintenance of existing assets, sustainability to reduce or offset our costs, critical public safety needs or concerns, and then meeting council priorities. And that's how those each of those capital projects are scored. So when you look at the score that you see beside your capital projects and you add those areas up, that's how those numbers are scored. You'll see that our public safety requests score high because they have a standalone score on public safety. So when you see things for the police department, the public works department, or the fire department, they score very high, higher than some other departments do. So if you have an administrative position, unless that position has a specific public safety need or concern that isn't being addressed, you will not see that score very high on our capital planning process. And again, the capital planning, capital improvement process goes through our planning commission. They then come to the finance committee, and the finance committee then puts that into place. And again, our goal is to establish a 5-year plan for a process for the council to follow. Capital improvement funding, we use bonding, we use cash, unspent reserves, unspent previous capital improvements. So like tonight, when you took money from one particular area to move it to another area, those are areas that normally would go into the mayor's budget to be used to prepare the budget. And so every year we have this happen. This is not something new that just happened this year. It happens every single year. We have some projects that are underspent, and then staff comes with a project that's over, and they say, let's take the money from there. And so I know that we're really trying to work very diligently this year on Steve, find us the money, and stopping doing that. And we have been very intentional about that. And so you have to understand that that is one area that if you take those dollars away from that area, you don't have them to spend. So the money that was taken tonight to go to the pool is actually money will not be available for the budget in 2021. Okay? Special revenues, wastewater treatment fund, and then new for us this year, which we approved tonight through resolution, the $750,000, is the local option sales tax monies. The numbers that we have saw and observed from the county on dollars coming in for the city side of that is a bit north of $250,000 per month. And so the finance director, the administrator, and myself felt comfortable of putting that into the budget of a dollar amount. Some of you will remember when we were talking about the local option sales tax, I had stated at one time that I think by the time that we're done with this, hopefully we'll be bringing in over $3 million a year. I think those numbers are very achievable, particularly with some of the numbers that we've seen coming in the last 2 to 3 months, when we now are starting to collect money off of sales, online sales from Amazon and those types of things. So our capital projects for 2020, including equipment of $1,151,000, special projects of $19,993,000, pavement management bonds of $3 million, for a total of $24,145,722,000. So when you look over the past years, you can see that beginning in 2010, we saw some reductions in our capital projects. Capital spending was used to rebalance the budget from the LGA cuts. And you can now see there's a difference in equipment versus projects in the project, as the project budget is a concern, that is a concern. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. You see those numbers as you go out into 21, 22, 23. You know, we try to keep that as level as we can. 2021, you'll see we stay fairly close, but in 2022, 2023, and then when you get out to 2024, we're seeing a substantial drop off there. So those are things to keep in mind as you are looking at the budget. At this point, I'll stand for any questions you may have. And if at the conclusion of questions, I'll turn it over for some closing comments to our finance director. So any questions of the council, of myself? Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. I was just wondering, you know, when you're forecasting for like 3, 4, 5 years down the road, what are you looking at, or how do you factor in growth, population growth, or business growth, or some of those? Are you using some sort of analytics? What's your method? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so what we do is we look back over the historical value for the last 3 years, and we look at what monies were spent over that period of time. Mm-hmm. Then we look at what we have for building permits, and that's why you'll see through the Community Development Committee, Dr. Ramstad presents to you what the building valuation is. And that's a very important number to look at. But then we also look at like TIF, local option sale, tax increment financing and our tax abatements, and are they falling off or not falling off? And then we look at some trends, and we look, and that's how we kind of grab those numbers. That's what I look at when I'm looking at it. Steve has a lot more analytics than I use, but I kind of look back over the last 3 years, and then I look at what I'm hearing, and then I also listen to what I'm hearing in the community on what I'm hearing developers saying they're bringing, or businesses where they're talking about expansions. One prime example of that is, last meeting when we had Epitopics in here, and they were saying they're going to do a $20 million expansion in Willmar here within the next 3 years. So that's something, when you take a look at that, those are some numbers that you take and put into the forecast. So I would say on my part, it's kind of a little bit of you throw the dart and hope you hit close. But I think on staff's part, it's a much more methodical process than it is for me. But for me personally, that's what that is. And that would be a question that maybe our finance director and our city administrator could answer a little bit too. But that's what I look at. So thank you for the question. Additional questions? Councilmember Maskey.
Curious on, you have on here the cash unspent reserves.
What page are you on?
The one that says capital improvement funding, page 9, and perhaps I'm looking at general fund revenues on page 5. Curious, what reserves are you looking at and at what numbers?
So those reserves that we're looking at is money that we have set aside into certain areas that are set aside that don't have a council policy that dictates what the balance should be. Or we would go to you as a council and ask you to change a policy. One example of that would be the emergency appropriations dollars that last year we took and moved into the street projects. Those dollars came from that area. Unspent previous capital improvements, those are areas that I talked about earlier when I talked about the thing like moving the money from into this pool tonight that we did. So those would be numbers that were from 2 years ago. Those numbers would be being pulled forward because they're dollars that haven't been spent. And you remember the council used to have a policy, it was a 5-year policy, right? The council had a 5-year policy that the departments had 5 years to spend the money. Well, I reduced that up so that they have to spend it within 2. I think it's 2, right? Yeah. So the 3rd year becomes available into the budget. Additional questions? Okay, thank you for, I'm sorry, go ahead. You have another question? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, on page 5, where the general fund revenues are actually listed, I was just curious on those other financial sources of were there any specific funds we are taking those dollars out of? Where are they from? Or I may ask.
I'm going to ask the finance director because I think I know one of the answers, but I don't know the other one. Wasn't one of them out of the employee one? Okay. He'll address both of those. I guess my fund balance one was a little bit off, but.
All right. Last year, we had the big packet with all the minutia. Is that going to happen again?
If you want a printed packet, that will certainly be available to you. You just, and Steve will talk about that.
Okay.
But Steve's going to address that piece. Otherwise, as the administrator stated, at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, they will be uploaded to your Dropbox.
Thank you.
Yep. So you'll have all of the minutia that you had last time. But if we're gonna make the copies, we're not going to make it unless you request it.
Right.
We're not going to make copies of every single little piece. So you will just get the summaries. And it's still that thick. So.
The forests, thank you.
The forest, thank you, correct. That's why we're putting it up online.
All right.
Yeah. And last year we had it available after this meeting, but we do not have it available. And that was my decision. So, additional questions? Okay, again, thank you for the opportunity. At this point, it goes to the hands of the Finance Committee, and I know you have a lot of work. I encourage you to take this as homework study because, as the administrator stated, we do need to set that levy at a special Finance Committee meeting in 2 weeks from tonight. And so you'll see on the agenda, not only will we have the work session, the mini retreat, but we will also have a formal special finance committee meeting where you have to address this, and it must be addressed that night. You have no choice but to address it. Okay? Unless the finance chair chooses to call a meeting between then and that, between now and that date, in 2 weeks. And she has the ability to do that anytime. It takes 3 days' notice, and it can be called. Okay? With that, I'll turn it over to the finance director.
Mr. Mayor and city council members, that would be a special city council meeting on the 30th. Finance will have their meetings prior to that, but in order to officially set the levy, the council will have to make that vote. So it'd be a council meeting before the mini retreat.
I will try, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll try to answer the two basic questions that were asked. Councilman Meskey asked about the fund balance on page 5 and on page 9 where it talks about unspent. That fund balance amount does consist primarily of two. One, the mayor talked about the carryover that we historically have used, and the finance committee will be getting the audit report. We have had some preliminary numbers, and it's in the $800,000 range. That was excess dollars from 2018. A lot of the reasons of why that number is where it was at was a lot of unfilled positions that happened throughout the year. Otherwise, we were pretty spot on estimated revenues and expenditures. The other financing sources primarily is the intergovernmental transfer that the city receives from the municipal utilities, and that historically, again, has been looked upon as a return on investment since the city owns the municipal utilities. So that consists the primarily amount on that. To talk to Councilman Alvarado's question about the what we look at for growth and those types of things, we do evaluate the tax capacity growth, and we talk about that a number of times when we're talking with bond people of what the potential tax-based growth is for the city, and that is driven a lot by development and the community development office and what those projections and building permits are coming in at, as well as what they historically have been in at, so that we don't hit a bubble and all of a sudden construction kind of falls off the ledge. So we look at that very carefully going forward on, are we continuing growth, and do we have the potential for growth both in industrial and commercial areas of the community? And we do with the expansion and relocation of the airport, the tax-based potential growth for the industrial park is a big factor. We also have a quadrant in the southeastern part of the community as far as commercial growth and the potential tax-based growth there. Residential growth is a factor that we look at, but it is primarily in the commercial and industrial area where we get the major growth. In working up the numbers and the slide that is talking about the actual tax levy, which is slide number 4, on a 2.6% increase on the rate, the tax capacity rate, which is the factor on where the tax rates are calculated, we had a $1 million growth over last year projected, and that's coming from the county. Now that's both increased market value for present properties, but it's also new construction. And they were not be able to break out that $1 million, some of it's new construction, because of the type of new construction that happens on the commercial industrial side, and even some potential tax exempt properties. So, but that is $1 million growth in our tax capacity over last year. So that is what we do look at that. The revenues, as many of you are aware of, are somewhat restricted due to the dollars that come to us from local government aid, which is from the state of Minnesota, the intergovernmental transfer from the municipal utilities, and then the property tax. Those are the three major revenues for the general operating. One of the items, the last item that I'd like to point out, and then I'll talk a little bit about the timing, is the level of capital projects that are projected for 2020 and the upcoming 3 years as well, and those are all primarily, a lot of them due to the local option sales tax. So there is a revenue projection coming in outside of the tax levy to pay for those. So that, and then the city hall is a large one as well. But as the Finance Committee minutes talked about, at this point, this will be on the Finance Committee agenda as a discussion item from now until the final action or recommendation in November 21st. And the Finance Committee does regularly meet the second and third Thursdays, or second and fourth Thursdays. Again, that could change. It's the same week of the council meeting, so that if a Thursday starts the week, month, then it would be different than that, but it's normally the Thursday following a council meeting. The last council or finance meeting, they did discuss inviting the full council to a special finance meeting on September 26th, which would be a week from this Thursday. The primarily reason for that would be to discuss questions that maybe have on the budget as it pertains to and could affect the preliminary tax levy. The action that would be asked coming out of that 26th meeting would be a recommendation to set a preliminary levy. As Administrator Gramitz had said, that levy can be reduced from that point on, but cannot be increased, and has to be by statute certified to the county auditor by September 30th. We have communicated with the county auditor, and will send them whatever action the council takes at their special council meeting on September 30th. And that would be action to set that preliminary levy. And so we have communicated with them, and so that would be the next step. Then from that point on, in the months of October and November, again, it would be a finance agenda item, so that if there are questions or additional information that the council wants, we would then provide that to the council and the finance committee. And then also, they will be out in your Dropbox tomorrow morning. They will also be on the city website. All the detailed information will be available. And then for those council members who want a 3-ring binder, staff would be more than happy to print those up as well. But with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or turn it over to Administrator Gramitz for any other closing statements.
Okay, thank you. I think our work is before us. There's going to be many decision points along the way. Just to highlight one that I think you're all aware of, is that the health insurance increase was proposed at 34, 35%. If we can negotiate that down to 20%, that difference, 14%, can either be reduced, or it can be applied to other projects that the city council may deem important enough to fund. So we really just got started into the meat of deciding, and there's some things that are going to happen between now and the end of November that we just have to work through. So there's still some questions in the budget, and as we work through them, those answers will then be, in front of us, and we can plug them into the budget, and we'll make that final decision first meeting in December as to what the actual levy will be. So we've started the path. I know everybody wants to say this is what it's going to be, but we've got a long way to go before we get to that first meeting in December. So bear with us. I think there's, as I stated, there's questions that need answers. There's negotiations with, with the insurance companies. There's many things that are going to happen behind the scenes. And when those happen, we'll bring them to your attention so you can adjust the budget accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, with that, council members' comments. Councilmember Fagerly.
No comment.
Councilmember Maskey.
No comment.
Councilmember Swantis.
Pass, thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
No comment.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you. I just wanted to plant the seed for October 5th for the Celebrate Our Diversity Walk. It's going to start at 9 a.m. at the Goodness Coffee Shop with a guest speaker, and they're just going to walk around downtown. So if you can make it, it would be exciting to have you there. This weekend, this Friday, is Willmar Homecoming. And the inductees are going to be Walt Gisselson, George Pinky Nelson, and Brad Welker. So I look for some excitement around the high school and around town at the football game. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Osmus.
I'm going to piggyback on that homecoming and just talk about safety and be cautious of kids going, let's toilet papering, TPing, and just be wary, be safe, and keep your eyes out for that. The other thing is Celebrate Art, Celebrate Coffee, and I hope that everybody will take part in that at Kennedy School. And then I just wanted to give some information about the pickleball courts. If people have been looking at that out by Sperryville, that's what's happening there. And if they thought, gee, nothing's been going on for about a month, it's because that surface had to cure, and it had to sit for 30 days before it can get striped or anything can happen to it. So in the next week or two, hopefully the fencing will go up, and then the courts will get striped, and we are going to have some awesome pickleball courts out by Sperryville. That's it for me.
Councilmember Plowman.
Just that Public Works Committee, we meet Wednesday, regular time, 5:15.
Councilmember Nelson.
Finance meets Thursday at 5:15. And before you go to Celebrate Art, Celebrate Coffee, you can go eat waffles at the community center and fundraiser for the Lions.
Additional comments? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Second.
We're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Steal my thunder. Everybody does it.
I didn't intend to steal your thunder.